So welcome back, Greg.
Welcome back.
Yeah, our first episode that we're recording in 2024. I'm afraid to say Happy New Year because by the time this comes out, I might need to say Happy Valentine's Day. So I will leave it at good to see you.
I will refrain from replying.
Things haven't changed in 2024. Um, we are going to be speaking with Ritchie Henman, who has penned this
Yes.
book, High Adventure Tales of Canadian Rock and Roll Survival. He is best known as a founding member and the drummer for Canadian classic rock band April Wine. And just a fantastic book. He's played in many bands. April Wine wasn't his last, it wasn't his first, it was like in the middle.
Mhm.
And we'll get to that conversation. It's called the 4-year tour, his time in April Wine. But I want to tell everyone else who else is coming up on the program in Q1. We have Stephen Page
Yes.
of the Trans Canada Highwaymen and formerly founding member of the Bare Naked Ladies. We have Mike Bruce, who is now one of the owners of Grant Avenue Studios in Hamilton. That's a very, very popular, very historic studio.
A lot of stories I'm
Yeah.
sure we're going to talk about.
We have Meredith Moon, local artist and daughter of the late Gordon Lightfoot. We have, who else do we have coming on, Greg? We have Dellen Gray, powerful voice, indie artist in Toronto. She's coming on. And we'll have a lot more guests, but
I have seen your emails, and there are a lot more surprises to come before we
yes,
finish the year.
absolutely. And looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It's going to be another great year of welcome to the music. And for those of you who've been listening, thank you for listening. Tell your friends to subscribe anywhere they listen to podcasts. If they listen on their Apple device and listen to Apple Podcasts, they can subscribe there. They can subscribe to Greg's favorite music app, Spotify. We're on there as well. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find. If you are a YouTube person, if you like watching your podcast, you can find us.
Why they would want to watch us, I don't know, but go ahead.
Well, they can see the change of hairstyles. They can see us getting older. I don't know. They can see your background.
You growing
changing.
hair?
Me growing
You growing
hair.
hair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have the soul patch. Your background has changed. That's you got it's busier.
It's busier?
Yeah.
Well, I got this. Oh, wrong way. I got this new setup here for the turntable and the stereo.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it has. You're right. It has changed. I didn't think it had, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. 2 turntables and
changed,
a
right?
microphone or something. I don't know.
1 turntable and a microphone.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get on with our conversation with Ritchie Henman.
Hi there, I'm Ritchie Henman. Used to play drums in a bunch of bands a long time ago. And the reason I'm honored to be on this show is because I have a book out called High Adventure, Tales of Canadian Rock and Roll Survival. I'm going to read you just a short bit from it later on. And I just want to say welcome to my music room and welcome to this show, which is called Welcome to the Music.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Richie, it's an honor. It's an absolute honor to have you on the show with us. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This is a lot of fun. First off, congrats on all your success. Most recently, Canadian Music Hall of Fame, Juno Hall of Fame, and Gregg and I were there for the Canada's Walk of Fame event at Massey Hall. Was it last fall? I think it was.
September, yeah,
Yeah,
September. I can't remember the
it
day.
was. What an amazing event! I left with a massive smile on my face just hearing all of the classic rock bands that I used to listen to. Back when I'm listening to Q107, and it was just fantastic. So again, first off, congrats on everything, Ritchie.
Thank you very much for that. I also left with a big smile on my face, and I'm going to be honest. It took over a week to wipe it away.
Yeah,
I had a
no
great
doubt.
I had a great night, and I had a great weekend in Toronto. I hadn't been there in years, and it was great to see the guys again, Myles and Brian and Jerry. Brian I see a lot because he doesn't live far away, and we've been best buddies for over 50 years. But the other guys I don't get to see much. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, listen. Speaking of Myles, as we were setting this up, um, he passed away. Myles Goodwyn, lead singer for April Wine for many years. Um, I wanted to ask you this right up front. You and your brother were starting bands all over the place back in the East Coast. Um, what was it originally that attracted your brother David and you to Myles?
Of all the local bands we saw in those days, and you didn't get to see them very often because most of the time you're playing the same night. But you'd finally, sooner or later, you'd get a chance to see those bands. And also, we knew Myles separately anyway. But as far as the on-stage Myles, he had it all. He had the voice, he had the guitar talent, he had a great look on stage. Him and Jimmy both. It's funny, I was thinking about that earlier, that they had a certain posture on stage it's important in show business, and it's particularly important in rock and roll to have a certain look. So they had that right from the first band they were in. But even before that, we used to play together when we were kids, years before any of us even thought of taking up guitar lessons or getting involved in music.
Yeah.
And Myles was instantly cool because he had a coonskin hat. This is the late 50s. I'm talking about 1958, 59, playing in the woods behind my grandmother's house. When we all went to visit, Myles lived next door. So when Jimmy went to visit with his family, or my brother and I went to visit with my family, who do you play with? You play with the kid next door because he's about your age, and he's got a coonskin hat. He was instantly cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we couldn't when we all started our first bands at the same time, but we couldn't start a band together because we lived too far apart, and nobody had a license or a car or anything like that. So it took until 1969 for us to have an opportunity to try it with Myles and Jimmy, and it was worth the wait.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite Myles memory, Ritchie?
A stage memory of Myles?
Whether it's on stage or even whether it's in the studio or whether it's just hanging out after a show.
Actually, more the offstage and away from the music stuff. When we first moved here to Montreal, we lived in we got a little ski shack up in Saint Sever up in the Laurentians, because in the off season you can get them really cheap. And we'd get up early in the morning, me and Myles and Jimmy too, and go fishing up in just north of Saint Sever in the brooks, and get brook trout, bring it home and cook it up for breakfast. And we do stuff like that. Myles and I tried cliff climbing one day at the north entrance to Saint Sever. There's a beautiful escarpment there. We got halfway up, chickened out like a couple of girls, and had a couple of smokes to calm ourselves, and then crawled back down with our tails. Stuff like that. That's the stuff I remember. And his insane and his crazy sense of humor. He had him and Jimmy Clench, I have to say, both had the most original sense of humor. They could, if they hadn't been musicians, they might have been good writers for a sitcom or a show like Saturday Night Live. But very original, outside the box humor, those guys.
Nice.
Look, That's the stuff I remember.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I actually I did spend some time at Savur and lovely area for sure. One of the questions that I wanted to talk about was just, playing with family. Like not a lot of bands. I mean, some bands, some famous bands have family members. You played with family, with brother, and what did that mean to you, and how did that sort of evolve?
That's funny. People ask that frequently, and they'll ask, "Did we ever disagree musically?" And no, we didn't. Music was the one thing that David and I always agreed on. We always had similar tastes in music. Always wanted to play the same music. And when we finally did go separate ways, it was 19. It was almost 1980. After April Wine and after All the Young Dudes. David wanted to get into a more of a stripped down punk kind of a thing, but I wanted to go with more. I wanted to go more towards keyboards and a little more towards what they call, I suppose, progressive music at the time. So when we finally disagreed musically, we finally went our separate ways musically, but never with any. It was never any animosity or anything like that. We saved that for the normal brother things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no.
It was interesting reading the book, and it's you get halfway through, and you finish off the chapter and the part about the 4-year tour with April Wine, and I'm going, what? He's in more bands, he's doing more music. Like my question I wanted to ask you, because as I was reading it, it was like, there was never any intention of starting one band and trying to last for 20, 30 years. It was, we're starting a band because we want to make, music, and we want to learn, and we want to progress. And once that journey has reached a conclusion, it was no big deal. We're going to go and do something else. We'll start up another band. We'll find different partners to write with and different people to play with. And it was interesting. It wasn't, leaving April Wine was, you weren't thinking about leaving money on the table. You were thinking about the next musical adventure. I'm wondering if you can maybe talk to us about where that comes from.
I think that David and I were always like that. We rarely kept a band together up until April Wine. The longest we ever kept a band together was 2 years. And it was partly because we moved a few times during the 60s from Halifax to St. John's, Newfoundland, then to St. John, New Brunswick. That had something to do with it. But even outside of that, we'd start a band, and as soon as we attained a certain level of success, we'd kind of say, okay, well, we did that. What do you want to do now? And move on. I don't know if it was a short attention span, but April Wine we stuck with for 4 years because it was going well, and it actually achieved everything we set out to do by about mid 1972, and we stuck with it for another year after that because we were just having a great time with it, and there was no reason to say, oh well, gosh, we did that. What are we going to do next? We got caught up in it ourselves and stuck it out for another year, and then started to think, well, okay, we did that. Now what do you want to do now? And we never actually had a plan. When we left something, we'd just leave it, and then it was like, okay, let's call some guys and do some jamming and play with some, try out some different guys and see what rings our bell. And that's just the way David and I work. It's safe to say we were never motivated by capitalist instincts. It had to be about the art. It had to be about the music. Are you happy playing that music? And if you are, you keep doing it till it gets the least bit routine, and say, okay, well, we did that. See ya.
Wow. It's funny because in the prologue you talk about the alcohol, the drugs, the ego, and the greed, and that you weren't like that wasn't none of the attractive for you. I wanted to dive into that and ask you like why write this book? Why, like, again, love it, great stories. What drove you to want to write this?
Actually, the main reason for writing the book was I wanted to write it all down while I still remembered it all. I have a bit of a reputation for my memory, and I decided around the age of 60 something, maybe I should just start writing all this down and see where it leads, and at least I'll have it all committed to a computer memory or something like that. My father died about 6 years ago of Alzheimer's, and it was the memory that went, and so I sort of determined, well, I've got his genes, so that was part of it too. After having started writing it, after my father passed away, I got really serious about it, and then I started thinking, gosh, maybe this is a book. Maybe the public would like to read this. My wife Claire was very encouraging about that. She said, people might like to read about that.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate to be very good friends with Toronto writer Martin Malhewish. So I contacted him, and he agreed to read the manuscript. And he was the first one that got back to me and said, yeah, this can be a book, and people will be interested in it and will probably want to buy it and read it, because they know the bands and they know other bands, and so many people have shared the kind of experiences that I've been through in that book, not just musicians, but civilians as well. So Marty encouraged me, my brother encouraged me, and I got a few other people to take a look at the manuscript, and then I submitted it to a publisher, and lo and behold, he agreed with everybody else. He said, yeah, people will want to read this. Let's Leslie Choice is my publisher, Pottersfield Press, and as he said, let's sell a few books and have some fun. And 2023 was nothing but that. It was just awesome.
Nice. You mentioned Claire, your wife, and it seems to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me without her, there's no musical career. She seems to be the glue that made everything work for you. Whether it's setting up deals or concerts and shows and partnerships. It's like without Claire, is there anything after April Wine? Is there an April Wine? What happens with Ritchie? Does he give up music and start racing cars? I don't know if you feel the same way, but is she the most important person in not just in your life, but in your musical career?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say that, Karim. Yeah, and I have a double advantage. I've been very lucky in my life. I have a double advantage this way because, yes, she's my wife. We've been married for 46 years now. 40. Oh,
Congratulations.
Whoops, do the math, Rich. 48. Sorry, 48 this year.
Get it right.
And but you see, she worked for Donald K. Donald. She was actually the first girl I met when we moved to Montreal, and we went down to knock on the door. She had just started working there. So we became friends at first. We were best friends for about almost 3 years before we started dating, and then eventually got married. She continued to work for April Wine years after I left. She finally retired. She finally retired from DKD in '95, which would probably be just about the time that April Wine was, let's say, had plateaued, and this is everything's all the wheels are turning by themselves now. And she retired, and I had more or less retired from music by then. I was designing and working at UNESCO. So yeah, I've been doubly lucky, and she's been my support both as part of the company when we were all a huge team from '70 until '73 when I left the band, and she continued afterwards. And then domestically, still, she has my back, and likewise, vice versa. So yeah, it's been a good. We're a good team.
Absolutely, for sure. I can't wait to read her book.
She could probably write a good book about her adventures, because she got to work with. If you read my book, you'll see little snippets here and there where Claire got to work with everybody from the Stones to Bing Crosby and Bob Hope and
Yep.
the Harlem Globetrotters, David Copperfield, the musician. She has a much broader experience in entertainment than I've had or ever will. So yeah, she could probably write a pretty cool book about her experiences too.
All right.
Absolutely. One of the I'll say towns, cities that comes up a number of times. My family's from the Manitoulin and the La Cloche Mountains, just north from the other side of the North Channel. Sudbury comes up a lot, or a number of times in the book. Can you share your memories about Sudbury and why it seemed to be really special to you?
That's one of those those things that's kind of hard to label. For whatever reason, whatever band I was in, whether it was April Wine, Dudes, Cruiser, every time I played in Sudbury with one of these bands, always had a great gig, maximum turnout, hospitality, and I don't know, it just happened. It's just a coincidence that every time I played Sudbury, it was just amazing. And of course, the fans are, I think any Canadian touring band from the Stampeders on through to Rush and April Wine will tell you Sudbury is a great place to play. The people there are excellent, first-rate audiences in Sudbury. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. I just, again, Ritchie's blind luck. Every time I played Sudbury, it was just awesome. And so you remember that, you know?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. One of the segments that we like to do is called Lost Venues. And normally we ask our guest for lost venue, but I'm going to ask you if you can share some thoughts about a venue that's no longer with us anymore that you played. You played at the Forum at Ontario Place in the round, which is very special to a lot of people. Can you talk about, your memory of that time, Blaine?
Of Ontario Place?
Yeah, Ontario Place in the Forum.
So that specific facility, that was as far as I remember, that was the only facility that I ever played in my life that was like that, where, yeah, as you say, theater in the round, not completely. The band is not right in the center of the circle. You're off to one side, but there is still I think it was probably still 10 or 20 rows of bleachers, up behind my drum kit, and there'd be people up there, but really most of them were around you, let's say like this. The only problem with that place is to get to the stage from the dressing room. The dressing room is on the other side, and you have to go through the crowd. There's no route outdoors to sneak up onto the stage and suddenly appear. Everybody can see you coming and trying to crawl your way through the crowd. And then when you, as I wrote in my book, when you leave the stage, and if you're a successful recording act like we were at that time in 72, 73, and the crowd that comes to see you is of the screaming teeny bopper persuasion, when it's time to leave the stage at the end of your show, but before your encore, where do you go? You can't just walk around and stand behind your amplifiers where everybody can see you. We talked about this before we went on stage that night. You can't just go and stand there like you're expecting an encore, come on, bring it. So you have to make a show of, that's the end of the show. Thank you. Good night. We love you. And go back to the dressing room and then let the crowd bring you back out. So going back to the dressing room the first time was difficult, getting through the crowd and then getting back out again. And by the time I got to my drums, as I said in the book, all my sticks had been stolen, as well as my bass drum pedal. Can you imagine?
Oh my God.
Somebody actually reached down and unscrewed my kick drum pedal and took it. Fortunately, I had a spare in a case beside my hi-hat. So when we got back on the stage, one of the roadies had to go back to the dressing room for more sticks while I got the spare pedal out and attached it to the kick drum. And Myles and David and Jimmy spoke to the crowd, I suppose, and then we were able to do our encore. And then after that, getting back to the dressing room, that was the part where you said, this looked great when it happened to the Beatles. All these screaming fans, cheering at you. And the thing is, though, they want something to bring home. So I wore glasses. The glasses went right away, and I had to fight a little to get them back. they literally pull your hair out, and it's painful. And try and take pieces of your clothing, try and tear. They're actually trying to tear your shirt off. I had a watch on, which you shouldn't do. You shouldn't wear a watch on stage. You're not supposed to know what time it is. Mistake on my part. Somebody tried to take that, And once we got backstage, we could laugh about it, but we could see that there was a potential for danger in there. And maybe in the future, if we're going to do something like this again, we have a little extra security.
Yeah.
Or perhaps someplace we can hide behind the gear,
For sure.
and guard our drumsticks and kick drum pedals.
Life is rough for a rock star, eh?
Oh, it's it can be. I'm going to sound like a broken record saying I'm lucky, but I really had the time of my life throughout my career. Very, very few heartaches. There's a couple, they're in the book, but
yeah,
I've been lucky.
For sure.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that story.
Our guest has been and is Ritchie Henman, founding member and drummer with the iconic classic rock Canadian band April Wine. Book is called High Adventure, Tales of Canadian Rock and Roll Survivor. Go pick it up at your favorite bookstore or go online to Amazon and order it. A fantastic read. Anyone who's interested in music, in this time of history, in Canadian rock history, just a fantastic book to get. Ritchie, you set it off at the top when you introduced yourself that you were going to do a reading from a passage in the book. I invite you now if you want to do that.
I'm good to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a short 2-paragraph bit from the final chapter. The final chapter is called Bonus Tracks, and these are little anecdotes that I could have fit into the narrative, except that they wouldn't be speed bumps, but they would be a quick left turn, let's say.
Yeah.
So I chose to collect a bunch of them, just save them for the end of the book and write them down. They go from 1 to 6 paragraphs, I think. And they're adventures on the road. I think a lot of other musicians out there will see parallels. The one I'm going to read is called Don't Push the Red Button. This takes place during the 2 years that I was in the band, All the Young Dudes. And we were on tour with the Bee Gees. We're opening for the Bee Gees. So Don't Push the Red Button. As chronicled in the chapter on Dudes, we rented a customized Greyhound Scenic Cruiser bus for our tour with the Bee Gees. As one would expect, there was a bathroom on the bus, but we rarely used it out of consideration for the time and trouble of the disposal process. There was a large red button in this facility, and the first thing we had been told was not to push that button, as it would immediately dump everything foul onto the road beneath us. The inevitable happened following our performance in Ottawa. Shortly before we left the venue, someone had invited a few curious fans to take a quick look inside the bus. As we came out the back door of the Ottawa Civic Centre in a driving rain, the exterior lighting revealed a wide stream of lurid green liquid flowing from under the bus down the slope of the parking lot towards the garage doors of the building. I believe that was the fastest exit from an arena parking lot on the entire tour. High Adventures, available at Amazon, Chapters, Barnes and Noble,
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Go online and order it. Ritchie, I want to ask you this. You've played in so many bands. You have been instrumental in creating music and playing on songs that are the soundtrack to many people, especially of Gregg and my generation. I want to ask you this though: what does Ritchie Henman listen to today? What kind of music are you into? Are you into music that you played in the past, or?
If I'm going to sit down and pick something off the CD shelf in the other room, it's more than likely classical. Grieg, Schumann, Schubert, the Russian composers. Crazy about the Russian, Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov. If I'm in the mood for something other than classical, it's going to be Sarah Slean or Joel Plaskett. And a couple of old albums. You know, we all have our classic rock from the 60s, 70s, whatever, that we just still can't let go of. For me, the first two Procol Harum albums, right at the top of that list. Of course, a couple of classic Beatle albums. Sergeant, if I'm out on the patio in the summer with my wife, we're just as likely to put on Sergeant Pepper and Abbey Road and maybe the White Album, you know, or one of the classic albums by Pink Floyd. We just never get tired of that, or Dire Straits. Just never get tired of that stuff. But if I'm choosing, it's going to be classical or Sarah Slean or Joel Plaskett.
That's when you're in one of your classic cars. I don't know if you still have any classic cars. If you're still a car guy, what kind of music do you listen to put the top down and race through the streets of Montreal?
Well, first of all, right now all I've got is a Chevy Impala sedan. I like to think I'm shopping for my dream car, which is a Mercedes convertible, a certain model of Mercedes convertible, and I may get one. Who knows? Next week, next year, because you know they come up for sale. But when I'm driving, to be honest, my favorite station is the local station from Ganawagi, the Reds, just across the river from us here, K103. And I've had the good fortune last year, since the book came out, to get out there and meet the guys that I've been listening to on this station. And we bonded right away. As a matter of fact, we're talking about going out to do lunch again, maybe next week, just to sit and talk about music. And they play everything on that station. You can, 1 minute it might be Lou Rawls, and the next minute it might be Snoop, and the next minute it might be a classic Johnny Cash song. I mean, it's pretty eclectic, and that's what I like. I don't want to have a radio station on where it's all similar, you know. But thank God for classic rock stations. If it wasn't for classic rock stations, I probably wouldn't have an opportunity to do what we're doing here and to have gotten a book published. They're the ones that perpetuated the music for us.
Absolutely. Ritchie, thank you so much for your time.
Yes,
this has been
a pleasure.
Amazing. This has been a lot of fun. Our guest has been founding member of April Wine, founding drummer of April Wine, Ritchie Henman. His book, go and get it, is High Adventure, Tales of Canadian Rock and Roll Survival. If you want to get more information on Ritchie, go to his website, ritchiehenman.com. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Happy New Year.